What's going on, guys, and welcome to another video on the channel. Today we're going to be doing my driver tier list for the 2023 Australian Grand Prix. This was a pretty hectic race. A lot happened. It was a little bit hectic, so it's going to be interesting to rank the drivers here because there's it's actually really difficult because there's a lot of drivers that, only 12 drivers finished, actually crossed the line. So we had 8 DNFs. And yeah, there was just a lot of chaos and a lot going on. So it's going to be a difficult one, but we're going to get into it. As usual, we've got our S, A, B, C, D, E, and F tiers. We're going to be putting all the drivers into these tiers based on how I thought they did in the Australian Grand Prix. So we will start, as we always do, with Alexander Albon. Now, he didn't finish. P19 DNF, second driver to DNF after Leclerc. And yeah, he had a really good qualifying, ended up P8 in qualifying, which is just such a good result, especially considering where his teammate Logan Sargent was. And then in the race, I think he was actually running as high as P6, and then he crashed. If he managed to actually, not crash and keep going and, keep in the points or keep doing as well as he was, it could have honestly been an S tier drive from Albon. But it's difficult because of the crash. The crash was his fault. These rankings, these tier lists are mainly on the race. I'm mainly rating them just on the performance in the race. A little bit of qualifying is counted in as well, but it is mostly for the race. Because he did have such good qualifying, and yes, it was his fault, the crash, I'm going to put him in D. It was a very good qualifying, and he was looking really good up until that point. It was completely his fault. I'm not going to quite push him down any further than D, though, because, I think he was just really pushing the car, and very unfortunate for him. Williams could have bagged a good amount of points, especially with everything else that happened later on, if he didn't crash out. So very unfortunate for him, but yeah, I think a D's being quite lenient, to be honest. But yeah, I just think he did such good qualifying that I can't put him any lower personally. Fernando Alonso now, he ended up finishing third. In the end, it was definitely third. Another one of Alonso's kind of, what position is he going to get, just like in Saudi Arabia. And yeah, it was decent from Alonso. I think he could have maybe put a bit more pressure on Lewis for second. And ultimately, yeah, he was fine. He was good. He was still very good though. P3, Aston Martin. I mean, they are pretty much there on pace, but he did decent. I'm going to put him in A tier. I don't think it's an S tier performance, but it was a good enough one from Alonso. Valtteri Bottas finished P11, technically the last of the runners because Sainz was P12 after his penalty. Bottas was nowhere in this entire race. I don't even think he featured once in the broadcast of this race. I heard something in an interview about how he switched onto tyres early on, then the red flag screwed him over because of that. Then he did it again towards the end onto soft tyres, and then that second red flag screwed him over again there. So perhaps he was screwed over by those quite a bit, but ultimately I just think that he didn't have the pace. His qualifying was terrible. P19 in qualifying was very, very poor. I don't think I'm going to put him in F. I'm going to put him in E though. If he crashed out, I would have put him in F, but it's got to be another E for Bottas. I think I'd give him an E last time as well. So yeah, not a good start to the season for Valtteri. Next up, we've got Nick De Vries, who didn't finish, ended up, it was P15 with a DNF because he got yeeted by Logan Sargent on the third restart. Yeah, not really his fault, but up until that point, wasn't really there with Tsunoda, didn't have the pace that Tsunoda did. So I think I put him in C the last two races, and he's really just not, do I put him in C again? Is putting him in D a little bit harsh? Maybe. Yeah. He got into Q2, didn't he? I think it was this race. He got into Q2, so I'm gonna put him in C. Nick De Vries has been very much nowhere this season. Tsunoda's definitely been getting the better of him. Even though the AlphaTauri is not good, Tsunoda's definitely been doing better, which I kind of expected, but I didn't really expect De Vries to be doing as bad as he is. So, yeah, it's going to be a C for him. Pierre Gasly, this is where it starts to get really tricky because if he didn't crash at the end, Gasly would have been here, maybe even here, maybe even S tier, because Gasly was doing some stuff in this race. He was keeping with Alonso, with Hamilton, with Sainz, battling with him, and Stroll. He was having a great little race. Honestly, probably the best race of his career, to be honest. He was having a great time. And then he went off the track on that third restart, came back onto the track, didn't really look properly to his right, and collected his teammate. Now, it was all a bit of chaos on that restart, so I can't be too harsh on him here. But it was his fault. It really was his fault. He should have checked. I'm not going to be super harsh on him. I'm going to stick him in B though, because he was so good. He was so good for the majority of this race. The first 57 laps of this race, he was amazing. It was that last lap with that restart that just, it got him down for me. But yeah, if he carried on the way he was before that, honestly, probably would have been an S tier. Really good performance from him. Just really unfortunate about that issue at the end. Lewis Hamilton ended up P2 in the end, and yeah, did a pretty good job. I'm going to put him in A tier. I think Russell was better than him, or from what we saw was better than him this weekend, because Russell once again beat him in qualifying. It's now 3-0 to Russell in qualifying, which is pretty crazy. And Russell got the jump on Verstappen at the start, got into the lead of the race. Hamilton got to second, but then, I have a feeling that Russell he seemed to have the better pace. He was up the front there. He was doing a good job. He, of course, changed onto a set of tyres after the safety car came out, then got screwed over by the red flag, and then his car ended up going up in smoke anyway. But Hamilton, I think, did about as much as he had to do. And yeah, it's got to be an A performance from him at P2. Very, very good job. Kevin Magnussen, he ended up finishing P7. Could have been a podium. Could have been a podium. His first ever podium for Hulkenberg. But alas, it was not because of all the fast at the end. But I do agree. I think the way they did, going out on that last lap, kind of rewinding the clock, was the way to go. Not sure about the Sainz penalty. We'll get to that later. But I do agree with that. So, yeah, it could have been a podium, but I totally understand why it's not, and I agree with it not being that way, or even a fourth if Sainz didn't get the penalty. But it's still a cracking performance by Hulkenberg. Yeah, just a really good run from him. Did he get through to Q3? He did, didn't he? He got through to... I'm going to put him in A. I'm going to put Hulkenberg in A. He's had some the last two races, the first two races of the season, Bahrain and Saudi, he hasn't gone very well in the race. This time, though, he had a pretty good race, ended up in the points. Even without the chaos, he would have been there in the points. So I've got to stick him in A. It was a very good performance from the Hulk. Charles Leclerc. Oh boy, so qualifying, all weekend actually, practice and qualifying, was considerably beaten by his teammate Carlos Sainz, which we haven't really seen before, to be honest, in the last three seasons, really. In qualifying, got considerably beaten as well, and then went off the track at turn 3-4 because he was trying to get around Stroll. Stroll gave him a tap, not really anyone's fault. It was a racing incident, but ultimately I think Leclerc should have been a bit more aware. And yeah, just because of that and because of how considerably he was beaten by his teammate, do I want to say he was worse than Albon? I mean, he almost got beaten by Albon in qualifying in a Williams. So, yeah, I'm going to put... it seems really harsh, doesn't it? No, I'm going to stick with it. He didn't have a good weekend. He's got to bounce back from this. He just wasn't on the pace the whole weekend. So, yeah, I'm sorry, it's an E. It's an E for Leclerc. Oh, you know what? No, I'm going to put him in D because I don't think the off was his fault. Ultimately, he should have been a little bit higher up the grid because of qualifying. But like I said, qualifying doesn't completely take it into consideration. But yeah, it's a D. It's very tight, though, for me for Leclerc. Kevin Magnussen. So got to Q2, but didn't get through to Q3. Got considerably beaten by his teammate in qualifying. Was nowhere near Hulkenberg in the race. And then just got some sun in his eyes and wasn't watching where he was going and hit the wall in the race. I'm going to put Magnussen in F. I think it's the first F of this season. We're 3 races in now. Got to start being a little bit more kind of, punchy with my decisions here. And yeah, he just not a good weekend for Magnussen at all. Very difficult. It's very much swapping between Hulkenberg and Magnussen on who has the better weekend. But I think Hulkenberg has the edge at the moment. But yeah, not a good one from Magnussen. Lando Norris had a great weekend, to be honest. Qualified P13, I think, but ended up finishing P6. Held off Perez for quite some time, actually. Very good job from Lando. Do I want to put him in S or do I want to put him in A? I'm going to put him in A. It's difficult to, because of the whole safety cars and the red flags, got up higher than probably he would have, but still a very good result from him. Without, with Sainz not getting a penalty and with Gasly not crashing out, he would have been, and I mean, if you also count Russell not having the issue, he would have been P9, I guess, with all those three. But I mean, that's not what happened. So yeah, I think an A. I think it's a bit of a push to give him an S, but it's a very good result from Lando. Esteban Ocon very much was, he only just missed out on Q3 by like 7 thousandths of a second or something, but was considerably behind his teammate. Ultimately, though, got taken out by his teammate. So I think I'm going to put him with Gasly in B. I think Gasly was way better than Ocon this weekend, but then that crash, which was completely his fault, not Ocon's, let him down. And then Ocon was kind of just nowhere, making his way through the field slowly, and then got done by his teammate. So yeah, I'm just going to stick them both in B. Sergio Perez, a very difficult one, had a terrible Friday and Saturday. Qualifying ended up locking up into, I think, turn 1, and or it might have been turn 3, I can't remember, and didn't finish a single lap. So qualified P20, made his way through to P5, which you think, oh, P20 to P5, that's pretty good. But then you consider Sainz, Russell, Gasly, Ocon, all those drivers. When you put it all together, of all the cars that were ahead of him, that ended up not ahead of him after that, third red flag, he would have been P7, which I don't think is actually that good. So, and considering how good that Red Bull is, it's not great. I'm going to put Perez, though, because he did somewhat fight. Do I want to put him in? I'm thinking about putting him in C. I mean, yes, it was a good charge through the field, but ultimately he had a way quicker car than everyone else and only ended up P5. He should have been higher than that. So, yeah, I think a C is there. Maybe a little bit harsh, but it's what I'm going with. Oscar Piastri ended up finishing P8 in the points for the first time this season. Had some good racing. That McLaren just struggled in a straight line, struggled to get past some cars, but did get past a couple. His overtake on Tsunoda is the only one I can really think of. Yeah, it wasn't as good as Norris, but it's still good enough for a B for me. Don't really think he could have done a whole lot more, especially, went out in Q1, so that wasn't great either. But yeah, decent enough. And first points at his home Grand Prix for Piastri. Then we've got George Russell. What could have been for Russell? He got the jump on Verstappen at the start, was in the lead, like I said before, screwed over by the safety car, screwed over by the red flag, and then his engine went up in smoke. But I think he was in a good position if his car didn't go up, even with the red flag. I think he was in, well, maybe not with the red flag because everybody then changed their tyres, but with the safety car, he was in a good position. Honestly, it might sound a bit stupid considering he didn't do much of the race, but I'm going to put him in S tier because I think he's the only driver that I'm going to be able to put in S tier this time. So yeah, I'm putting a driver that didn't finish in S tier, but I think, I think he would have had a very good race if he actually managed to finish, and he did everything. There was nothing more that he could have done. So I've got to put him in S tier. Carlos Sainz, another very difficult one, just like Gasly. He was a rocket ship this weekend. He was miles clear of Leclerc all weekend. In the race, he was making moves. He was really pacey, really aggressive, was awesome up until that third restart. He took out Alonso, give himself a 5-second penalty, finished at the back of the pack, which was P12 out of everyone that finished. Do I agree with the penalty? To be honest, no, I don't. If the race carried on, like if, you didn't have the two Alpines climbing together, Maybe you didn't have Sargent going into De Vries, and the race just carried on with that spin, from Sainz and Alonso, and it finished like that. Yes, I agree with the penalty. But that happened. The race got red flagged. We did that last final lap under the safety car. It was kind of just a parade to the finish line. So cars were reset back to where they were. Alonso was back in third again. I don't think that, and Sainz couldn't do anything about his penalty because they all had to be in a line to cross the line. I don't think that was fair. Ultimately, though, the contact was still his fault. So because of that, I'm going to give him a B still. Alonso did he went in a little bit deep. I mean, it's just kind of the nature of that corner, but did kind of come back a little bit. Reminded me actually a little bit of the Sainz and Russell incident from Kota last year. A little bit. Not quite as aggressive as that, but yeah, a little bit like that. So yeah, it's going to be a B. If it wasn't for that incident, Sainz would have been in A, maybe even in S, to be honest. But yeah, unfortunately, that last restart kind of stuffed him over a bit, well, a lot, not scoring any points. Logan Sargent, I mean, he was off the pace of his teammate all weekend. I think took a bit of a gamble with the first safety car and then yeeted De Vries into non-existence. I'm going to put him in F. Maybe a little bit harsh considering he's a rookie, but we're 3 races in now. He just completely smashed into the back of De Vries, and at this point in time hasn't even been given a penalty for it. That's what I don't understand. Sainz has got a penalty, but Sargent doesn't. Is it because they were down the back of the field anyway and wouldn't have been scoring points? Is it because both of them ended up out of the race anyway? I don't know. It's not really fair, I don't think. But yeah, not a weekend to remember for Sargent. Lance Stroll, he finished 4th, but I don't think he did as well as it looks on paper. He was a decent way behind everyone else. Kind of got stuck behind Gasly and Sainz for a while. So I'm gonna stick Stroll in C. I think it was just fine from him. Yuki Tsunoda finally scored a point this season. He did not end up with 3 11th places in a row. And yeah, pretty good race from Tsunoda. Don't really think there's much more he could have done. Ended up having a bit of a car issue as well, actually, I think. So all in all, very good. I'm actually going to stick him in A because that AlphaTauri does not look like a very good car. For him to come through, and especially with the issue he supposedly had in kind of the middle to end of the race, to at least score that 1 point. Yes, there was a lot of DNFs, but he was there to score that point. Yeah, I think that's a good result. I'm going to give him an A for that. Max Verstappen, of course, won the race. Did not have a good start. Didn't have a good first restart either. And yeah, also went off at one point. So it wasn't a perfect weekend for Max. I'm still going to give him an A though. I mean, he won the race. He probably was just relaxing a bit too much because he just had like 12 seconds in hand. So that's why he went off. And yeah, his starts weren't great apart from the final start, which is probably a good job because if he didn't have a good start on that third restart, he may have been in the wall or spun around. So yeah, I think it's an A from Max. Not really much else to say. And then finally, Zhou Guanyu, who finished P9, scoring his first points for Alfa Romeo this season. All in all, I think a pretty good one from him. I'm going to give him a B. Saw a few nice overtakes from him in the feed during the race. And yeah, convincingly beat his teammate this weekend. Yeah, doing a really good job against Bottas, actually. I don't know what's going on with Bottas, but he seems nowhere at the moment. And Zhou is just building and building. And yeah, honestly becoming a much better driver than I initially thought he was going to be. So anyway, that is my ranking for the 2023 Australian Grand Prix drivers tier list. I said that in a very weird way. There it is. Do you agree with me? Down below, let me know. Very chaotic race. Pretty difficult to rank some of these drivers, but that is what I've come up with there. So anyway, thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed, please go ahead, like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.